skateboarding is not a sport for you, is it? Is it more a way of life, a philosophy? How would you describe it?
It's a great question. In a sense, it's a little bit of all of the above. But one thing, it cannot be classified as specifically a sport. That's for sure. I think that shows that it's proven in a number of ways, because the guys that generally, and there are exceptions of course, but the guys who wield the most respect in it are the ones who differentiate themselves through what they do most, distinguish themselves. And it's not necessarily through competition. They stand outside. What they do is different. Sometimes they can be essentially the worst competitors. In fact, some of the most popular guys and beloved to the community are guys that don't even bother with contests, because it's really becomes more of an expression of who you are. Likewise, with some of the tricks, some are done more perfectly than others. We call it textbook. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're the best. Of course, everyone admires that. But again, if you can skate genuinely how you are, which is a natural fingerprint, I skate a little bit how I am. The top guys, you kind of know their personalities, and when you know that, you see that in spades. In that sense, it's a genuine expression of who they are, and that classifies it, to me, as an art. That's the engine that makes it turn. That's what we all aspire to, is not just, hey, this guy did this so high. Classically, sort of the way we look at sports. I think the athletic part is more or less a hurdle. It's how we express ourselves. Can't do it without that. It's important to all of us. But the baseline of what makes us feel a sense of belonging, what draws us to it, it's because we express ourselves. And so in that sense, it's very much of an art. And because of the nature of how we share this stuff together, it becomes, you can say, lifestyle or philosophy or whatever it is. It is the way we express ourselves. It's the way we look at the world. So I guess you can call it a philosophy.
One of the things that you talk about is about how the way you deal with failure makes the difference between being good and being great.
Yeah.
So why is failure and your ability to handle that so important to success?
Yeah, that's a good question. Another thing I love about skateboarding is, and again, which steers it away from being classified as a sport, is because everyone brings different attributes to it, different combinations of which, different gearings. And the general idea is, okay, make the most of what you have. Well, there are always going to be guys that are, a lot of skaters out there, guys that can match what you do to some extent. You will always be tested some way, somehow. This guy doesn't, I don't do stunts, I do more tech stuff. And this guy does, call it stunts, like huge rails, huge sets of stairs only. He will always find someone to, okay, I can do that too. And so if you say apples to apples, what it comes down to, this footage where you just genuinely get, it takes a lot out of you to generate this footage. Video parts can take years, injuries. The guy who's able to sustain that and never give up, that's the guy that will inevitably shine more, even if he has sometimes lesser qualities than another guy. I've seen so many gifted guys, and I think we see this in sometimes school, the super gifted guy who's so used to getting everything pretty easily, he doesn't ever get a real work ethic, and eventually he ends up kind of sidelined, mediocre at best. It happens all the time with skaters. I'll say all the time, it happens often. I see gifted guys, but they just can't deal with failure in the same way. They don't embrace it the same way. It's hard for everyone. Whether it's 5 hours of trying the same trick and again and again and again, they're like, I'm sick of it, I'm going home. The guys that I know that make it to the top, it doesn't matter how sick they might be, they're not going home until they get the trick. So that's what makes a difference, and that's what I mean by saying that.
And as much as it's important to embrace the failure, you also warn that it's important to not focus on it too much.
Absolutely. If you focus so much on your failures and your weaknesses, it has a paralyzing effect. You're dwelling on stuff. I know For example, having goals. Sometimes I have lofty goals. My friends do. We all do. We all have goals. Like, man, one day I'm going to do this. But if you fix yourself to that goal and you don't see anything else on the horizon, which is natural, because that's what it takes. We all have that in our personality. Like, I'm not going to stop until I get that. But sometimes if you attach that to a goal that is out of your reach and you continue to fail, it will just grind you into nothing. And if you dwell on that, then it can end you. And I've seen that happen. Good guys, they shoot for something and they can't cope with, I'm failing again and again, they just can't cope with it. They can't just forget about it, move on, come back to it. There are other versions of that, but that's a very concrete example. So in that sense, don't dwell on your failures for a number of reasons, that primarily. That ends careers.
So really the important part is the ability to get back up again.
Yeah, get back up again and also change focus. Like, sometimes you're just not good enough for whatever you're after, but maybe in striving to get that, you've ratcheted up another skill set, hurt something else. And I've had to do that so many times. I think we all have, really honest about it.
So has there ever been a point, have you ever felt yourself just not wanting to get back up and do it again?
Sure. Lots of times. We have injuries. I've had a horrible. It took me out for years, really. My bones fused together, and I'm skating in the dark late at night. I'm like, why am I doing this? When I could be, it takes some degree of discipline, to go out there every day. And there are other things you could be doing that are a lot cozier, And you wonder, why am I doing that? But then that's like a mood. That's something that passes like weather. Because that thing inside of you is, man, what else would I be doing? Like, I want this. This is who I am. You wake up, it's a new day, you go after it. So, like, yeah, of course, we have those feelings.
So are there any circumstances where you find that it's more productive or best to walk away for a while?
Sure it is. Sometimes you have to walk away for a while to regroup. And if anything, you can ingrain a sense of failure into you. I've done that with tricks. Some of the harder tricks, I can think of them now. Casper Slide 360 flip. Man, I tried that back to back to back to back, and I couldn't make it the way I wanted it. And meanwhile, everyone else is passing me, getting footage. I'm stuck on this thing. I'm falling behind. I'm feeling, right? You're like, All right, I'll pause, as hard as it was to do. And then you come back fresh. You're like, why did I have so much trouble with that? It's amazing. It's not always like that, but that's an important one. It does happen.
So shifting gears just a little bit, what do you see as the roots of innovation and creativity?
Man, the very root, it's hard and singular.
Well, it doesn't have to be singular.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe there are multiple.
Yeah. First and foremost, the love of it. Just tumbling ideas, taking things apart, looking at things in syllabic form. A joy in doing something new, even if it doesn't seem that special. Sometimes you can spend the same energy doing what someone else has done that's ratcheted up much higher in terms of performance, or it's more photogenic or whatever. And it's easy to kind of want that. It's okay to go after that. But in the end, to genuinely love the sheer act of creating something because it is a fingerprint of you. It's like, man, it's part of me. Other people can take that and share that. And that, to me, is if you have that in you, some people I know, they're amazing skaters. And they're rock solid people, and I admire them. But they're not built that way. They just like raw performance, and good for them. But they usually don't create much. But maybe that doesn't matter because they perform so well. People are built differently. But to me, that's the root of it. Just that love of taking things apart, and it's just joy. This is who I am through what I do.
And So you called the skateboarding community, you referred to it as an open source community. What do you mean by that, and why is that so important to the community?
That is a great question. Skateboarding, the very nature of it, again, we earn respect by identifying ourselves through what we do. So there's a given sort of alphabet, there are a basic number of tricks, like in anything, it's not infinite. There's staple tricks. We all take from that. It's a common pool that we've created, it's our language. But then we take it and we nurture it, like, how can I make this mine? How can I put my fingerprints? How would people see that and they go, oh yeah, he did that. In fact, just by how it's done, that has to be him. That's the way the guy thinks. And then you give that back to the community because we all see it. We all need each other's approval. All of us, and this is the benefit of that I've had and my peers, is we've had some degree of fame, signed autographs, all that stuff. And it's cool. It's awesome. I mean, it really is. But in the end, you get that and you think, that's popularity? It's not real respect. Because they can't necessarily, and I don't mean in a dismissive way, but someone who doesn't understand what you're doing, then how much can their praise genuinely mean? And so when a peer gives you that, that's what makes you want to move mountains. So likewise, when we take a trick and we give it back and we get the nod from a peer and we see a peer doing it and taking it further, and you look at that, you think, man, and then you take from that and you just churn together and there's a synergy of it. So this whole pool grows larger. We, in turn, as skateboarders, it's our language, it's our community, we all grow richer from it, and we in turn contribute to it. So it's this push-pull relationship through which we get respect for ourselves through the approval of them. Because all of us, to some extent, are outcasts. We want to do things our own way. And that's what I believe makes skateboarding very much of an open source community. We do things our way. It generally feels better when it's moderately against the rules. You know?
Yeah. So for my last question, who inspires you and what has been the driving inspiration behind your journey?
Simple questions. I mean, sometimes it's simple. I got daddy issues. I can just leave it at that. I'm still that kid no matter how many contests you win. You're like, I suck. And you just work harder. As simple as that. I love what I do. I love the community and the respect. I love getting older in it so I can go in forums like this and say, this is what skateboarding is. It's actually a little bit like yours. And when I discovered being injured and I was playing with Linux, I was like, oh my gosh, these guys are like us. They're awesome. This is theirs. They made it. And they're a little bit rogue, just like we are. You know? So what drives me is, look, I started by that, like, I just need to get away and have something that's mine. Next thing I know, I become part of something. And I create something and get approval from that. So now that's driving me because I need and I seek that approval. And I feel at one with the community and a responsibility piece of it. Endowed by that. And that's what inspires me. What inspires me in general, it's not, Albert Einstein and Stephen, it's not all these great minds because they're distant. It's the guy next to me, the guy that I know. Some of the guys you saw today, all of them inspire me. All of them. People I know that have walked through the same stuff, but who ratchet it up in their own way. People I relate to. Those are the people that inspire me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.